Today we are jumping into the story of King Solomon, right at the absolute peak of his power. It's this incredible story of wisdom and wealth and just monumental glory. But you'll see, hidden inside all of that gold is a pretty powerful warning about how the greatest success can become a kind of gilded trap. So, let's get right into it with a number that is just mind-blowing: 666 talents of gold. That's what was pouring into Solomon's treasury every single year. Now, to put that in perspective for you, one talent was about 75 pounds, or 34 kilograms. So we're talking about more than 22,000 kilograms of pure gold annually. And the wildest part? The source material makes it clear this was just his base income. This doesn't even count all the other money coming in from merchants and traders and tribute from other kings. It's just staggering.
So let's really set the scene here. Solomon has just finished 2 decades of nonstop, nation-defining building projects. I mean, he built the glorious temple of the Lord, and then he built his own magnificent royal palace. This is it. This is the absolute high point of his entire reign, a moment of just unparalleled national pride and prosperity. And this timeline, well, it really shows you the sheer scale of his ambition. Look at this. It took 7 years to build the temple, a sacred home for God. But then it took him another 13 years, that's almost double the time, to finish his own royal palace. 20 solid years just dedicated to creating these iconic buildings that would define his kingdom for centuries.
Okay, but what happens next is what's really fascinating. At this exact moment of triumph, God appears to Solomon for a second time. But this isn't just a pat on the back. No, this is a critical warning. It's a moment where Solomon is presented with a choice that is going to determine the fate of his entire dynasty.
And the terms really could not have been clearer. God lays out this incredibly stark covenant. Path number 1, if Solomon stays faithful, if he walks with integrity like his father David did, his family's throne over Israel will be secure forever. But path number 2, if he turns away, starts worshiping other gods, the people will be completely cut off from the land, and the very temple he just spent 7 years building will be cast aside.
And you know, tragically, this wasn't just some hypothetical warning. It was a prophecy. The source material points out that it came true with, well, chilling accuracy. Just over 300 years later, in 586 BC, the Babylonian army would march right into Jerusalem and burn that magnificent temple straight to the ground. The prophecy of ruin was fulfilled.
Now let's get back to how this all builds into the legend that we know today. Because despite that really ominous warning, Solomon's fame for his wisdom and his just unimaginable riches spread like wildfire across the ancient world. His name became totally synonymous with a golden age, one that drew the attention of kings and queens from the farthest corners of the map.
So you have to wonder, right? Was it all just hype? Was it just exaggerated stories being passed from one merchant to the next? Well, the Bible introduces a key witness, a very powerful ruler who decided she was going to find out for herself if the rumors about Solomon could possibly be true. Enter the Queen of Sheba. She takes on this grueling 2,000-kilometer journey all the way from her kingdom in what is now modern-day Yemen. And this wasn't just some casual visit. No, this was an audit. She came loaded with hard questions to test the very limits of his famous wisdom. And Solomon, he answered everything, leaving her totally breathless, not just by his smarts, but by the pure grandeur of his entire court. I mean, her own words just say it all. She declared that the reality of what she saw in Solomon's kingdom was so magnificent that all the incredible stories she'd heard back home didn't even capture half of the truth. His reputation wasn't just deserved, it was a complete understatement.
And the wealth that was backing up this reputation was, again, just mind-boggling. Beyond that massive annual tribute of 666 talents, his trade missions to places like Ophir brought in another huge haul of gold. Then you've got these lavish gifts, like the 120 talents from the Queen of Sheba alone. The gold was just pouring in from every single direction.
Inside his palace, the opulence was on another level. He had hundreds of ceremonial shields made from pure hammered gold. Every cup, every plate, every single utensil was solid gold. And here's the ultimate symbol of his glory. Gold became so common that silver, a precious metal in literally any other kingdom, was considered pretty much worthless in Jerusalem. But this is where the story takes a turn. Because when you look closer at the foundation of this golden age, you start to see cracks forming. You see these troubling decisions and questionable policies that suggest all this success was actually sowing the very seeds of its own destruction.
And it's interesting. The source material points to this powerful quote from Jesus. Centuries later, he would use Solomon's legendary splendor as a point of comparison. He reminds us that all of this man-made glory, the gold, the palaces, it all pales in comparison to the simple, natural beauty of a flower. It's a hint that there's a deep spiritual problem brewing just beneath that glittering surface. And the evidence is right there in his policies. He starts using forced labor, enslaving the remaining Canaanite peoples, the original inhabitants of the land that God had commanded Israel not to oppress. He makes these shady land deals, giving an ally 20 rugged, undesirable towns. And maybe most importantly, he starts building a massive military machine, a clear shift in national strategy. So here's the crucial point. Solomon, the wisest man alive, began to systematically break the specific laws God had set up for Israel's kings. These rules were designed to keep the king dependent on God, not on worldly power. For example, the law said not to amass a huge number of horses, but Solomon builds this massive chariot army with stock from Egypt. The danger there? You start relying on military might instead of God. The law also forbade returning to Egypt, but Solomon opens up major trade routes. The risk? You're re-exposing your people to an idolatrous culture they were supposed to have left behind. This wasn't just about breaking some rules. It was a fundamental shift in who or what he was trusting. And this brings us right to the central paradox of Solomon's reign. His greatest assets, his incredible wealth, his international fame, his military power, they were becoming his greatest spiritual temptations. They were testing the very foundation of his wisdom.
Think about it. Despite having been given everything, wisdom, riches, and honor beyond any other king on earth, Solomon was actively making choices that put him on a path leading away from the very God who gave it all to him. The wisest of kings was slowly but surely straying from the law.
And that leaves us with the story's core tension, right? It's a question that echoes through history. And honestly, it applies to all of us. How do you handle immense success, power, and prosperity without losing the very character and wisdom that got you there in the first place? At what point does a blessing become a burden?